Hi, everybody, again. And so, if we have understood the introductory lesson on the importance of maintaining a democratic nation in order to avoid democratic disconnection, it is now time to turn to the institution we left aside last time. I mean, the European Parliament. And today we will talk about the European Parliament and the importance of these institutions, especially in light of its role as the key expression of democratic representation. To do this, we need to revisit the key historical milestones that have shaped the European Parliament into the institution we know today. So, after the creation of the European Economic Community and the European Atomic Energy Community, the Common Assembly of the ACSC was extended to all three communities. Composed of 142 members, the new assembly held its inaugural session in Strasbourg on 19 of March 1958 under the name European Parliamentary Assembly. On the 3rd of March 1962, it was officially renamed the European Parliament. So before direct elections, members of the European Parliament were appointed by the national parliaments of each member state and thus held a double mandate. At the Paris summit of 9-10 of December 1974, it was decided that direct elections would be held from 1978 onwards, and the European Parliament was invited to draft a new proposal. In January 1975, Parliament adopted a new convention, and after resolving several disagreements, the heads of state or government reached an agreement on the 12-13 of July 1976. The decision and act on electing representatives by direct universal suffrage were signed in Brussels on 20 of September 1976. Following ratification by direct universal suffrage were signed in Brussels on 20 of September 1976. And following 1978, I'm sorry. And the first direct elections were held on the 7th and 10th to 10 of June 1979. What we have to say is that we had a lot of enlargements during these years. From 1973, we have the first enlargement with Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom joined. The number of members of the parliament rose to 198. 1981, the second enlargement, Greece joined. 24 Greek members of the parliament were initially appointed by the national parliament and then replaced in October 1981 by directly elected members. The second direct elections were held on 14 until 17 of June 1984. 1986, the third enlargement, Spain and Portugal joined. The number of seats increased from 434 to 518, with 60 Spanish and 24 Portuguese members first appointed, then replaced by elected ones. What about 90s? The German reunification. The composition of the parliament was adjusted. In June 1994, the number of the member rose from 518 to 567. Following the fourth enlargement, the total increased to 626. In 2000, NICE Intergovernmental Conference, a new distribution of seats was adopted for the 2004 election. The maximum was set at 732. The 15 existing member states saw their seats reduced from 626 to 535, while 197 seats were allocated proportionally to all new members. 2007, Bulgaria and Romania joined. The number of the seats rose temporarily to 785, and after 2009 elections, seats were reduced to 736. The Lisbon Treaty at Article 14, paragraph 2, fixed the maximum at 751. Temporarily raised to 754 from 2009 until 2014 term. 18 additional members of the parliaments were added following the ratification of 2010 protocol. And in 2013, Croatia joined. The number of seats rose temporarily to 766 to accommodate 12 Croatian members elected in April 2013. And then 2014 elections, seats were reduced from 2066 to 751. And after the UK's withdrawal, the 1st of February 2020, redistribution lowered the number of 705. And last, the 2023 adjustment. Demographic changes led to the addition of 11 seats, followed by a further 4 through a European Council decision of the 22 of September 2023, setting the total at 720 members of the Parliament from 2024 until 2029 term. But now let's see the gradual increase of the powers of the European Parliament. The replacement of member states' financial contributions with the Union's own resources marked the first expansion of the European Parliament's budgetary powers, as set out in the Luxembourg Treaty signed on the 22 of April 1970. A second treaty signed in Brussels in July 1975 further strengthened these powers. The Single European Act of 17 of February 1986 gave the Parliament a greater role in certain legislative areas, like the cooperation procedure, and made its assent mandatory for accession and association treaties. With the establishment of the European Union through the Treaty on European Union on the 7th of February 1992, the co-decision procedure was introduced for specific legislative fields, and the cooperation procedure extended to others. This marked the beginning of the Parliament's transformation into a co-legislator. Parliament also gained the power to approve the composition of the European Commission, a key step in enhancing political oversight of the EU executive. Then the Treaty of Amsterdam in 1997 reformed and broadened the co-decision procedure, making the Parliament a co-legislator on an equal footing with the Council. The appointment of the Commission President became subject to parliamentary approval, further strengthening its supervisory powers. Then the Treaty of Nice extended co-decision even further. Signed on 2001 and entering into force on February 2003, the Treaty of Nice revised the EU's institutional framework to prepare for enlargement. It reinforced the Parliament's legislative and oversight powers and expanded the use of qualified majority voting in the Council. The Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union was introduced and introduced another significant extensions. Qualified majority voting in the Council was broadened, a new system as of the 1st of November 2014, following Article 16 of the treaty, and the co-decision procedure was expanded to about 35 new areas. This ordinary legislative procedure became the main decision-making process, covering nearly all key issues under the Treaty of Functioning, like Article 294. Parliament also gained a stronger role in treaty revisions. And this is the Article 48. Under the Treaty of Lisbon, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, initially signed in Nice on the 7th of December 2000, became legally binding. So during the 2019 European elections that took place from 23 of March until 26 of May, Parliament made full use of its powers under Article 14 of the treaty. It shares legislative and budgetary authority in the Council, exercises political oversight, and elects the Commission President. In line with the Council, exercise political oversight and elects the Commission President. And in line with the Article 17, Paragraph 7, the other commissioners might also be approved collectively by Parliament. So, recent studies estimate that EU legislation drafted by Parliament contributes over 1 trillion annually to the Union's GDP, while also strengthening rights for citizens and businesses. The EU budget is another significant contribution. Evidence-based policy making is supported by independent expertise from thematic departments, providing analysis and advice to committees, delegations, and Parliament's leadership. Since 2014 election, European political parties have nominated lead candidates, so-called Spitzenkandidaten, for the role of Commission President, aiming to increase voter turnout. On 24 of January 2020, the EU-UK withdrawal agreement was signed. Parliament approved the deal on 29 of January 2020 with 721 votes in favor and 49 against, and this was also the final sitting of UK member of the Parliament, as Brexit took effect on the 1st of February 2020. On the 28th of April 2021, Parliament approved, following Article 218, paragraph 6, letter A of the treaty, the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. The most recent European elections of the 10th legislature were held from the 6th to 9th June of 2024. But where does the Parliament work? The official seat of the European Parliament is in Strasbourg. Most parliamentary committee work takes place in Brussels, while the institution's General Secretariat is based in Luxembourg. This arrangement, confirmed by the Edinburgh Summit in 1992 and the Amsterdam Treaty in 1999, has historical roots, but is not always easy to manage in practice. If you plan to meet with a member state of the European Parliament, it is essential to specify the location clearly. Otherwise, one might mistakenly travel to Strasbourg, the Parliament's official seat, while the member is expecting them in Brussels or vice versa. But why 3 cities? In 1951, the institutions of the new European Coal and Steel Community were supposed to be based in Brussels. All founding members agreed, except the Belgian prime ministers, who preferred Liège. Since unanimity was required and no consensus was reached, the choice fell on Luxembourg. For the ECSC Assembly, however, Luxembourg lacked a hemicycle large enough to host plenary session. So the nearest one was in Strasbourg, belonging to the Council of Europe. Strasbourg, symbol of the Franco-German reconciliation, became so the venue for plenary sessions in 1952. With the creation of the EEC in 1957 and the growing importance of community action, more institutional activities gradually shifted to Brussels, while financing and judicial bodies, as well as the Court of Auditors, remained in Luxembourg. The Commission and the Council concentrated most of their work in Brussels. The Assembly, renamed the European Parliament in 1962, as I said, also progressively moved parts of its activity there. In 1989, the report by British Conservative member of the Parliament, Derek Prague, officially recognized this partial transfer aimed at rationalizing Parliament's functioning and bringing it closer to the Commission and the Council. Since then, plenary sessions continue to be held in Strasbourg, with additional sessions in Brussels, while the General Secretariat remains in Luxembourg. Thus, the Parliament still operates across 3 cities today. It was during the Edinburgh European Council in 1992 that a political agreement was reached. Brussels, or better, Belgium, accepted Strasbourg as the official seat of the Parliament, with 12 plenary sessions per year, on the condition that other political activities like committee meetings, political group meetings, and additional plenaries would remain in Brussels. This arrangement was formally enshrined in Amsterdam Treaty, which entered into force in 1999. So today, the Parliament, with its 732 members, no longer rents the chamber of the Council of Europe, which itself has expanded. The Parliament has now 2 hemicycles for plenary sessions, one in Strasbourg and one in Brussels, while its General Secretariat remains in Luxembourg. The debate on the choice of seats and location resurface regularly, especially due to the financial and practical implications of this geographic dispersion. However, any change requires a unanimous decision in the Council of Ministers. Let's turn now to the internal organization of the European Parliament and its powers. The European Parliament elects a president for 2.5 year renewable once. The president represents the institution externally and in relations with other EU bodies, chairs plenary debates, and ensures compliance with the rules. The president is assisted by 14 vice presidents. Together, they form the Bureau. The president also sits on the Conference of Presidents alongside with the chairs of political groups. These groups are transnational formations created based on political affinities, composed of at least 20 members of the parliament elected in at least 1/4 of the member states. There are also quaestors responsible for administrative and financial matters concerning the member of the parliament. Parliamentary work is organized into 20 committees, 3 subcommittees, and 39 delegations, each with its own bureau. The plenary session is held 11 times a year, and all months except August last 4 days from Monday to Thursday, and is attended by the Commission and the Council to facilitate the decision-making process. But let's see what the European Parliament does. The European Parliament is the only EU institution, as I said in the last lesson, directly elected by citizens. Its functions have expanded over time and are now grouped into 3 pillars: legislative powers, budgetary powers, and oversight powers over the EU executive. Let's start from legislative powers. Together with the Council, the Parliament adopts most EU decisions. Under the ordinary legislative procedure, formerly called the co-decision procedure, Commission proposals must be approved by both Parliament and the Council. Parliament and the Council thus act as co-legislators across more than 40 policy areas, like economic governance, trade, security, justice, energy, transport, environment, agriculture, consumer protections, etc. Parliament also has a right of legislative initiative. Member of the Parliament can request the Commission to present proposals, but the Commission is not obliged to act on them. And what about budgetary powers? Parliament and the Council together form the budgetary authority of the EU with equal powers, following the Lisbon Treaty provisions. They both vote on the draft budget prepared by the Commission. Parliament also reviews the annual implementation of the budget. And then the oversight powers. Parliament elects the Commission President, proposed by the European Council, and since 2014, the Spitzenkandidaten system has been used, though not consistently. For example, Ursula von der Leyen in 2019. Commissioners must be approved by Parliament after public hearings, and nominations can be rejected, like Rocco Buttiglione in 2004. Parliament can adopt a motion of censure forcing the Commission to resign collectively, but never used so far. And the Commission must regularly report to Parliament. Parliament may create temporary committees of inquiry or special committees, question the Commission and the Council, and receive citizens' petitions that we will see in the next lessons. In more serious cases, it can bring matters before the Court of Justice of the European Union. Let's turn now to the electoral system and the European elections. Electoral systems are not identical across member states. The Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, its subsequent amendments, the Treaty on European Union and the Lisbon Treaty established certain principles for elections. Fundamentally, elections determine the members of the European Parliament and indirectly the President of the European Commission, who is appointed later through a specific mechanism. Why do European parties formed by national parties present candidates for the presidency? Because, as I said, of the Spitzenkandidat system, the lead candidate of the winning party is proposed as head of the EU's executive in Brussels. In Italy, the 2024 European elections took place on the 8th and 9th June. In other member states, dates vary. This flexibility is a distinctive feature of the European elections. Each of 27 member states can autonomously define parts of the voting rules, provided that suffrage is universal and the system is proportional with multiple seats per constituency. This result is substantial differences among states. Ireland and Malta use the single transferable vote system, the Hare method. Voters rank candidates by preference. During the count, a quota of valid votes is calculated to determine which candidates are elected. Italy, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Croatia, and Netherlands allow voters to express preferences for candidates within the same party list. In Luxembourg, instead, voters may select candidates across different parties. In most other states, closed lists are used. Seats are allocated according to the number of votes won by each party, with the candidates selected in order of their position on the list. So, in most countries, elections are held in a single national constituency. However, in Belgium, Ireland, Italy, and Poland, the territory is divided into region or macro-region. So Germany uses a mixed system where candidates can run either in one or more Länder or at the national level. Let us now turn more specifically to the relationship between the European Parliament and the democracy. Supporting democracy worldwide is a key priority for the European Union. Democracy remains the only system of government in which people can fully exercise their human rights. And it is essential for long-term development and stability. As the EU's only directly elected institution, the European Parliament is particularly committed to promoting democracy. The EU's approach to democracy is closely linked to its human rights policy. and is based on Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international and regional standards on human rights, democratic institutions, and elections. Since 2015, EU democracy support has also been guided by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially Goal 16, inclusive, participatory, and accountable institutions, and Goal 10, yes, I'm right, um, reducing inequalities. But which are the key elements of this strategy that this strategy include country-specific strategies on human rights and democracy, setting priorities and objectives for partner countries, human rights and democracy clauses in international agreements, allowing the EU to suspend trade or cooperation in case of serious violations. A dedicated funding instrument to support civil society actors working on democracy and human rights. Electoral observation is a fundamental tool for the EU to support democratic development in third countries, promote human rights and the rule of law, and contribute to peace building and conflict prevention. Long-term observation missions monitor the entire electoral cycle. They usually begin 2 months before elections and continue until official results and appeals are completed. Short-term observers monitor election day and vote counting. The chief observer is typically a member of the European Parliament, and at the end of each mission, a final report is published with the conclusions and recommendations, providing guidance on electoral reforms and possible EU support. Beyond observation, the EU also provides electoral assistance, technical and material, helping to improve conditions for democratic elections, strengthen the capacity of state and non-state actors, and support reforms, necessary reforms, taking into account the entire electoral cycle. In November 2021, the EU and its member states launched the Team Europe Democracy, so-called TED initiative, to strengthen global support for democratization. TED is built on 3 pillars: research on best practices and policies in supporting democracy, a global TED network, the provision of expertise at national level on democratic support. The EU and its member states also work in multilateral fora, such as the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and the OSCE, to promote and defend democracy. But what about EU funding instruments? Key EU funding tools to support democracy abroad include the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, the so-called NDICI, Global Europe, the Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance, the IPA, which helps candidate and potential candidate countries meet accession criteria. Well, the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, Global Europe, supports geographic programs for non-candidate countries, as well as global thematic programs. Its goals include strengthening democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. the Human Rights and Democracy Program for a budget of 1 billion almost focuses on civil society organization and human rights defenders operating independently of partner governments. It also funds EU elections, election observation missions and complementary activities. In 2013, the European Endowment for Democracy, the EED, was established as an autonomous private law foundation. It supports political and civil society actors striving for democratic change, providing flexible, rapid, and low bureaucracy funding, with a focus on the EU Eastern and Southern neighborhood. And its board includes representatives of EU member states and institutions, including up to 9 NEPs. But which is the role of the European Parliament in supporting democracy? As the only directly elected EU institution, the European Parliament plays a leading role in promoting sustainable democracy worldwide. Each year, it adopts a resolution on human rights and democracy in the world, reviewing the EU's approach and offering recommendations. On the 9th of November 2023, it adopted a recommendation on strengthening the right to participation and the legitimacy and resilience of electoral processes in a liberal system and authoritarian regimes. The Parliament contributes actively through election observation, as I said, sending parliamentary delegations to monitor election and referenda in third countries if invited and part of the EU or OSCE mission. Complementary activities linking election monitoring to pre and post-electoral actions, human rights initiatives, and parliamentary capacity building. It also gives support to partner parliaments, offering training, study visits, scholarship, and joint programs to strengthen legislative institutions, integrate human rights in legislation, and enhance relations with civil society. Promotion of democratic actors, assisting human rights defenders, supporting media freedom, and encouraging independent journalism. The Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought and the community of its laureates also form part of the Parliament's global democracy support strategy. So let's look at the European Parliament programs and democracy support effectively. The European Parliament's program for strengthening women's leadership targets female legislators, taking into account both professional and personal perspectives. The main beneficiaries are women from countries and regions identified as priorities by the Parliament's Democracy Support Group. The Parliament also provides support and advice in the fields of mediation and dialogue through targeted activities with partner parliaments, as well as international events focused on mediation and conflict prevention. And also the Jean Monnet Dialogue for Peace and Democracy is a mediation tool developed by the Parliament to promote communication between parties and the achievement of consensus. The Young Political Leaders Program is a flagship initiative aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding among future leaders outside the EU, thereby building trust and peace. The European Parliament resolution building EU capacity in conflict prevention and mediation, adopted in March 2019, acknowledges the importance of mediation and dialogue processes and the Parliament's role in this regard. Also, the Democracy Support and Election Coordination Group, the so-called DEG, provides political guidance for Parliament's various activities. It is composed of 16 members of the European Parliament and co-chaired by the chairs of the Committees on Foreign Affairs and Development. It decides on Parliament's election observation missions and adopts an annual work program for other activities. For 2025, the Democracy Support and Election Coordination Group has selected the following 5 priority countries and regions: Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, the Western Balkans, and Pan-African Parliament, as well as key thematic areas: pre- and post-electoral activities, parliamentary mediation and dialogue, actions in support of human rights, including the Sakharov Prize, Community and Fellowship, and initiatives on parliaments and democratic innovation. So finally, the European Parliament is also holds observer status in the Interparliamentary Union, an organization that brings together parliaments from across the world. I hope everything was clear about the European Parliament, its powers, and its support to democracy, in which it is actively involved. And see you. Thank you very much, and see you at next